So to begin, just like Cameron, just talking about your tool, which just shows that there are ways, that there are opportunities for journalists, to begin to surface this information. So what's next for newstracker.org?
Yeah, I didn't cover the rest of it. Right now we track Facebook content, but we really need to track the entire social web. So we're going to add YouTube, Twitter, Reddit, 4chan, Gab, Discord, and a whole bunch of other services. And we're going to design an interface to allow us to do claim review on the content that's being surfaced, and also add a whole bunch of other tools to make it easier to surface the most critical misinformation, narratives, and specific issues that we need to be able to address.
And Joan, when you look at everything that's happening out there, at the computational propaganda, what else do journalists need to know just to make sure that they are not?
Yeah, I think that we've moved into a different adversarial media moment. So it used to be that we had rival news organizations and we thought about things as, partisan and nonpartisan, and that there were different points of view. But I think right now, what we're seeing more and more in the online news space is very much adversarial in ways that you're not fighting other news agencies for the story here, right? That the narrative and the lead is being controlled by these manipulators who have many, many different intents. And so it's really important that journalists engage with the profession in a very active way right now and try to understand those processes and those pathways.
Thank you. So we'll go to this question. Just please tell us your name and what organization you're with.
I'm Charlotte Ann Lucas. I run Nowcast SA, which is a nonprofit news organization in San Antonio, and I'm also a co-founder and on the board of the local independent online news publishers. And on behalf of local news publishers, I'm very interested in what, Frederick, you're talking about, showing the credibility of the information that we publish. I mean, we have an obligation also to show readers you can trust what we publish. And so I'm interested in your scoring and the method of saying this is trustworthy information. Do you also use things like what Google has used in the past, which is the number of places we link to? So for instance, I say in my stories, don't just take my word for it, I link out to other things. How important is that in your process as well?
What we decided to do, which was a choice from the beginning, is not looking at the quality of a story based on its reverberation on social media. Because we believe that if you begin to look at the engagement in which a story will have on social sphere, for instance, it could be misleading. What we wanted to look at is the structure of the story itself, and in a second way, we will look at the reputation of the story at some point. For instance, one of the extension of this project, which could be a long-term extension, could be, for instance, an IMDb for journalism, International Movie Database. I'm always fascinated by this tool because it's a kind of objective tool when you think about it. It is just exposing the body of work of a person working in the movie industry. We should be able to do the same kind of stuff for journalism. And it could have a good effect on local media, because one of the biggest concerns there is with this kind of stuff is designing a thing that will serve only the large media. My concern is also for the long tail. In my business, which is looking at the media industry for my newsletter, The Monday Note, I keep finding people who are super good at retrieving the good information, are highly specialized in one single domain of technology or in business and so on and so forth. These ones are the most challenging to discover, and we need to build tools to that end.
Thank you.
Hi, Patrick Butler with the International Center for Journalists. I have a couple of questions for a couple of the award winners. First, for Cameron, does your grandmother know you're using her in this way, and does she still think you're the world's greatest grandson?
So, important question, in fact. So I actually, as part of my reporting at the PBS NewsHour, we're doing a whole series on misinformation, junk news, and the battle to stop it. And I was actually in Indianapolis last week interviewing her, and I sat with her looking at her Facebook account, and that was actually, that image was a screenshot from the interview that we did. So she did not understand a few weeks ago, but she does now, that she's an important piece of this puzzle of the work that I'm doing.
Are you going to release the interview?
Oh, yes, the interview will be airing on the PBS NewsHour in a couple of weeks.
Cool.
Oh, tweet it out.
And actually, a more serious question for Daryl. You mentioned how you're using the work of the documenters to, in some ways, supplant the work of media organizations that no longer cover these public meetings. So I'm interested in what you do with this information, how you get it out to the public. Do you have any measurement of who's accessing the information from the public meetings?
I'm not sure if I would use the word supplant. It's not meant to replace the work of journalists. There's a lot of places, I think, where there just are no journalists. But some of those skills that journalists employ, those roles, I think really overlap with the role of citizens. So right now we are in that phase of answering the question, what do people want from this kind of content? So we're studying it. That's kind of the short answer. We're doing some careful research with groups around the city to figure out, is it a newsletter? Is it a website? You know, like these are, I think it really matters how we present it and what the breakdown is. So I don't have an answer yet.
Okay.
But I have a lot of ideas, and we will be blogging about it and putting out what we're finding as we go.
Great, thanks.
Hi, yeah. So seems like there's been a lot of AI solutions to this misinformation problem, and I think that the biggest challenge there is the risk associated with potentially these algorithms ending up censoring groups that may already be marginalized. You know, they don't, they're not actually fact-checking these articles. They work by correlating them to previous examples, and it could be that those same features that it's extracting also correlate to like people that are uneducated or something like that. So how do you intend to ensure that any trust algorithm doesn't end up potentially censoring groups that may already be marginalized?
I could do an entire presentation of the dangers of AI. I would mention the arms race, which is threatening the media sphere between the bad actors, which has been described by you, and the good actors, which are hopefully in this room. We can mention the fragility of the models. We can mention the fragility of the data set. And actually, to reply to your question, the more data set and the more diversified in terms of origin data set you might have, the better it will be. Having said that, I mean, there is a big threat when it comes to the biases. There are a lot of studies which has been done about the biases of data set, and yes, it is an imperfect science. And there is even, to scare you a little bit more, there is even a paper which has been released 2 months ago, something like that, which shows that when you take an image, you just change one single pixel, and the image will change in terms of category. Instead of saying, this is a dog or this is a cat, it will change completely for one single pixel, as long as this pixel is perfectly, carefully identified. So, I mean, we are entering in the world of arms race and fragility. You're absolutely right.
Thank you. It's such an important question. I just wanted to note, Knight Foundation is part of an artificial intelligence fund that's now in partnership with MIT and Harvard's Berkman Klein Center to help address some of these very important questions around information quality. So you'll be hearing more about that. We think at Knight Foundation it's extraordinarily important for 3 things. You know, there's great opportunity here for automation and in newsrooms. There's also great concern that journalists, a beat reporter for criminal justice, for education, does not understand enough about the impact that AI is having on predictive policing and on schools' scores. And then thirdly, what is the impact of all of this on information quality and how people are consuming news and information? So thank you very much for that important question. And we're definitely very deeply concerned about it and looking at it. Wanted to thank our panelists here and Joan, our prototype winners, and Joan Donovan, and all of you. And we'll be continuing to tweet out links on other prototype challenge winners. And what we'd really love to do is to hear what you think are the potential solutions to multiple big sticky problems. Thank you.
Thank you.